Ah yes, Yoshi's Island. This is a game I hold very near and dear to my heart, but shockingly enough, I didn't really grow up playing this game. My cousins did have a copy of it with Mario World, but I rarely ever booted up Yoshi's Island. I remember trying it out of curiosity a few times, but I wouldn't play it for super long and ended up shutting it off, and then just went back to playing the more comfortable Super Mario World for child me at the time. Development for Yoshi's Island was conceived not too long after the character's debut in Mario World. Miyamoto always desired to make a Yoshi spin-off game since World, with Nintendo putting out a few puzzle games starring the character like the plainly titled Yoshi in 1991, along with Yoshi's Cookie in 1992. Miyamoto would ask Yoshi's original designer, Shigefumi Hino, to help come up with a platform game featuring Yoshi. Hino felt that the gameplay of 2D Mario had been explored enough, and would work to make this Yoshi game to be more accessible than previous Mario games. The developers came up with the idea of having Yoshi carry Mario around, eventually deciding to make this a prequel to Mario World, with Mario being a baby, basically explaining why you can't play as him in the game. A pretty interesting story about Yoshi's Island is that the graphics were originally going to take a more Donkey Kong Country approach, using pre-rendered 3D sprites of the characters. However, when this version of the game was first demonstrated to Nintendo's marketing team, they were pretty unimpressed with how the game looked. So Miyamoto would come up with a new, cartoony art style for the game, which went over better for the team. And despite the pre-rendered look being abandoned, some elements from it would still remain in the final game. Specifically, the opening cutscene still features these leftovers of the pre-rendered sprites, which look a bit glaring in comparison to the rest of the game, but it's still neat that these early concepts still appeared in some shape. Not to mention, Yoshi's new island in 2014 would somewhat use a pre-rendered art style of sorts, similar to what the original Yoshi's Island was gonna do. I respect that a lot, even though I don't think it looks that good or makes the game any better. But that's a topic for another day. Newly hired Nintendo artist, Hisashi Nagami, would be brought in to help with the game's new art style. According to him, the graphics for the game were made by the artist drawing them by hand on paper, then their art would be digitally scanned, where it was then approximated pixel by pixel to be in the game, which at the time sounds like it must have been hell to do. Production of this game would last from February 1992 to June 1995. Of course, the one aspect about Yoshi's Island's development, which is the main thing just about every review of this game talks about, is the Super Effects chip. This was a graphical processor for select SNES games created by Argonaut Games, which made the games capable of showing off full 3D graphics on the Super Nintendo, most notably the first ever Star Fox in 1993. Yoshi's Island wouldn't use the original effects chip from Star Fox, and instead used an upgraded version of it dubbed the Super Effects 2 microchip, making this one of only 3 known games that use said chip, the other 2 games being the SNES port of Doom and Winter Gold. While Yoshi's Island doesn't entirely utilize the Super Effects features, it still contains a lot of cool 3D effects that can help give the game a more unique look in comparison to the first Super Mario World. And yes, the full title for the game is Super Mario World 2: Yoshi's Island. However, just about everyone refers to the game as Yoshi's Island. I've rarely ever heard anyone refer to it by the Super Mario World 2 name. I always forget that this was meant to be a follow-up to Super Mario World because, as you'll see from the rest of the game, the two couldn't be any more different. Unlike some of my first few Mario reviews, I'm going to be playing the game on authentic hardware and not the NSO app. It's alleged that the Super Effects 2 chip actually makes the game a little difficult to emulate at points, so I really wanted to play the game in its original form for this review. Yep, I got a physical copy of the game, and an authentic SNES Junior model for this review. It's also modified to have better video output since the original output can be pretty blurry. If you guys watch My Life in Gaming's RGB videos, then you know what I'm talking about. For those who do, I'm not using a SCART cable to capture footage. I'm actually capturing footage using Eon's Super 64 HDMI adapter, which was obviously made for the N64, but since both the Super Nintendo and the N64 use the same video port, I can use the Super 64 to capture footage on my Super Nintendo. Technically, I actually already showed this off in my Mario World review, because I want to say about 80 to 90% of footage from that video were captured directly from the SNES. I know, none of you care about this crap, so let's just get to the game. Yoshi's Island boots up with a cinematic explaining what the plot of the game is about. A stork was in the process of delivering baby Mario and Luigi to their parents, until Kamek, an iconic Mario character in his first ever appearance, intervenes the stork to try to kidnap the babies. However, he only manages to grab one of them. Meanwhile, baby Mario ends up falling onto a dinosaur named Yoshi, who also also finds a map that the stork was apparently carrying. So Yoshi takes the baby back to the other Yoshis, and they all decide to join together to help baby Mario find his twin brother. And that's the basic gist. The Yoshis are trying to rescue baby Luigi and carry baby Mario around through 6 different worlds to get to him. Jumping right into the gameplay, Yoshi's Island plays a little different from the usual Mario games. The first thing to note, there's no run button. Yeah, Yoshi just runs at top speed, and he's a pretty fast dino. And when it comes to his moves, obviously returning from Mario World is his ability to swallow enemies, and it was greatly expanded upon in this game. Whenever Yoshi eats an enemy, they can pop out as an egg, which gives Yoshi a chance to use his new ability, throwing eggs. Going off the SNES controls, tapping either A or the right shoulder button will make an aiming reticule appear, which will move up and down. Simply tap either button again and Yoshi will throw an egg. You can even hold down the shoulder buttons if you want to lock the reticule in place to make more precise throws. And if you're curious, you can cancel a throw by pressing X. Not much else to say, it's such an awesome ability and pretty iconic for Yoshi in general. Another iconic move is Yoshi's flutter jump. Basically, when you hold the jump button while in the air, Yoshi will wave his feet very aggressively, and it lets him stay in the air for a little longer, which is super helpful for platforming in some of the more difficult levels. The flutter jump, just like Yoshi's other abilities, is such a staple trait for the character that it can sort of make going back to Super Mario World and seeing Yoshi not have the flutter jump is a little strange. And while I have a lot to say about the new Super Mario Bros. Games and how sterile they can really feel to a point, I do like how those games incorporated Yoshi's flutter jump. That's great. The main gimmick for Yoshi's gameplay is that he's constantly carrying around baby Mario. You see, Yoshi doesn't really have a health bar of any kind, and while there are power-ups, he doesn't really need a mushroom or anything like that to stay alive for a little longer. Instead, whenever Yoshi gets hit, he'll drop baby Mario, which causes Mario to float away in an air bubble, and you gotta desperately go grab him again. And the game makes sure you want to do that because the moment he falls off Yoshi, he starts crying profusely, and that cry is pretty goddamn infamous for a lot of people. It is so loud and it's so obnoxious. By the way, some fans found the original uncompressed sound effect for Baby Mario's crying, and I used it to make an extended version that lasts like 10 minutes. So enjoy experiencing hell. But yeah, if Yoshi drops Baby Mario, you gotta quickly get him back. Otherwise, you'll see a counter at the top right counting down, and once it hits 0, some enemies sent by Kamek will swoop in and take Baby Mario. It also costs you a life too. So yeah, make sure you recollect Baby Mario again so he doesn't get kidnapped. That visual of Baby Mario getting taken away always haunted me as a kid. It's probably part of the reason why I didn't want to play this game that much. It just creeped me out. Though looking back at this part, I might have accidentally fused this one with the Yoshi's story death screen, because that one literally shows the Yoshi getting taken right back to the castle. So yeah, while I didn't grow up playing too much Yoshi's Island, I would watch my sisters play a lot of Yoshi's Story. But that's a story, pun intended, for another day. Okay, I'll see myself out. When you pick up Baby Mario again, the game will slowly reset the timer back to 10 seconds. But you can add more to it by picking up these tiny stars, with the timer maxing out at 30 seconds. Also, it doesn't seem like Baby Mario is entirely pointless. There's a power star you can find later on which will let you play as powerful Baby Mario. It's a temporary power-up, but it's still a lot of fun to use when you come across it. Okay, I'm gonna tackle this first because I can't help it, but this is seriously one of the most gorgeous looking SNES games I've ever played. It's so colorful and weirdly nostalgic for me to go back and play. It always has such a welcoming feeling to it. The crayon art style is just so damn cute. I especially love the cool 3D effects that some graphics can have, and it still looks pretty damn good for the Super Nintendo. Collecting stuff in this game also feels really satisfying. While you're just going from point A to point B, there's actually a ranking system at the end of levels where you can be graded up to 100 on a chalkboard. You can achieve a 100 score by collecting 5 special flowers in the levels, which can also give you 1-ups if you find enough of them. You also have to max out the counter to 30, and there's also red coins you could find, with a few of them being hidden in some groups of coins. Usually they're coins that have a red tint on them, and I really love the sound effect when you collect the red coins. It just makes them so satisfying to pick up. Yeah, while the game is mainly a platformer, there's a bit of collectathon aspects thrown in too, especially in comparison to the first Mario World. I've never 100%ed this game, so I've also never really gotten a perfect 100 score in any level, but I'll discuss that later. A lot of returning returning enemies from previous Mario games are back, though it's not just the returning Shy Guys, Koopas, and Goombas to worry about. Yoshi's Island is also chock full of new enemies. To name a bunch, there's the bandits, who have different variants, the crazy daisies, bats called Fang, Blowhard, its official name, I'm not joking, frickin' frogs, Goonies, new variants of boos called Boo Guys, which just makes me question if the Shy Guys have their own boos, then what the fuck are the normal boos supposed to be? A bunch of funny monkeys, little mousers, nipper plants, Tap Tap, one of the rare enemies that Yoshi can't eat, and many, many more. Then there's Nep-a-Nut, or however you say his name, who's probably my personal favorite. I just love the graphics on him so much. It's so impressive and cool, so there's a pretty good reason why he appears on the game's box art. Unlike the last few games where there were about 8 or 9 worlds per game, Yoshi's Island only has 6, but that does not mean the game is shorter, with each world having about 8 levels each, including 2 castles. Each of the levels also have you playing as a different colored Yoshi, which is a really cute detail. In terms of power-ups or other items that Yoshi can use, well, some worlds can contain these big Shy Guys that, in turn, create bigger Yoshi eggs. Throwing them can actually cause shockwaves on the ground, which kills every enemy on screen. Another item Yoshi can find later on are the watermelons, with the regular ones letting Yoshi spit seeds at enemies. There's also blue watermelons that give Yoshi ice breath, and red watermelons that can give Yoshi fire breath. But aside from the watermelons, there is a pretty interesting power-up that Yoshi can come across. These are the Metamorphosis Bubbles, or Morph Bubbles, which can transform Yoshi into a vehicle to get through a certain section of the level. This can range from Yoshi turning into a helicopter, a submarine which can shoot missiles, a mole tank for digging through tiny areas, a train that can travel on tracks in the background, and there's a standard car. The Morph Bubbles are decently spread across each world, so you don't really come across them in every level, but they're usually always fun to use. Plus, if there's anyone interested, there's a glitch you can do through the Morph Bubbles that can let Yoshi completely ditch Baby Mario without triggering the countdown timer too. So for those of you who really hate this stupid crying baby stuck to Yoshi's back the whole game, then go try out this pretty hilarious glitch if you're interested. One other item that returns are the red power switches, which can enable blocks to appear to temporarily help with platforming, and they can also spawn coins in some parts of the levels. The switches can also make these red arrows appear, and crouching on them will take Yoshi to a bonus area. A few of these areas can contain the fan favorite character, Poochie. Poochie is basically a hyperactive but also indestructible dog that can help Yoshi get past certain areas. He's honestly really iconic and I love him. You know what other characters I love? The Huffin' Puffins! Look at these fuckers, why are they so cute? You can even use the babies as ammo and they'll boomerang right back to Yoshi. I would die for them! Speaking of love, the soundtrack for this game is one of my all-time favorites in the entire franchise. Composed once again by the one and only Koji Kondo, who had been composing the music in these games for a full decade at this point. Kondo really utilizes the SNES sound chip capabilities, and I think it's a vast improvement over Mario World. The music is so damn memorable and catchy. I adore the main Flower Garden music. The athletic theme is iconic and probably my favorite one from the games. I love the underground music. The castle music is perfect. And since there's 2 castles per world, we have 2 different boss themes too, and they both sound great. Just like with other SNES games, fans have tried tracking down the original audio samples for this game, and managed to reconstruct a few songs from Yoshi's Island in their entirety. So if you really like the other restored music tracks from Mario World, then I recommend looking up the restored Yoshi's Island music too. The game would also end up getting an official soundtrack release in November 1995, roughly translated as the original sound version. So for those collectors out there, I'd recommend tracking down the original soundtrack CD if you're interested. Yoshi's Island isn't necessarily a difficult game to get through, but there are some levels later on that can really test your platforming skills. Doing a rundown of the worlds and bosses, the first world doesn't really have too much to mention, but it's still a fantastic start for the game and it contains a lot of elements that'll repeat throughout it, like the main enemies and such. Oh yeah, if you collect enough flowers, and then the gold ring lands on a flower, then you'll get to play a bonus game. They're usually just matchup games, which can earn you some items for use in levels, or just extra lives. World 1-2 is where you'll see the Chain Chomps return, with this level introducing ones that you could see in the background at first, but can leap in the air and drop right down into the foreground. These are a different kind of Chain Chomps that are fittingly known as incoming chomps. They can be pretty damn freaky. Anyways, every 4th and 8th level, you'll travel through a castle that has a boss at the end. Castle 1-4 introduces a new version of Blarg known as Gargantua Blarg, which is basically just a lava version of Nep-a-Nut, and it looks just as cool. For the boss battles, You'll typically see a regular looking enemy at first, until Kamek appears and casts a spell on the boss to make it grow, or just change them. The boss for Castle 1-4 is Bert the Bashful, and since he's the first boss in the game, he's pretty easy. You just keep throwing eggs at him until he gets naked and dies of embarrassment. I like how most of the boss fights contain little things that can shoot out eggs for Yoshi. It really helps a lot. After that, World 1-5 has an auto-scroller. Not a fan of that, but the athletic music's great. Another highlight for World 1 for me is level 7, mainly for these weird floating things in the air known as fuzzies. And whenever Yoshi touches them, holy fucking shit. The graphics get all trippy as hell and Yoshi starts staggering around. This isn't the only level where you encounter fuzzies, so the effect of these can be a little obnoxious, but I won't lie, this is easily one of the coolest graphical effects in the whole game. Moving on to the next castle, 1-8 features most of the same stuff from 1-4, but this castle has these liquid platforms that can lift up. I love their beady little eyes, it's pretty cute. The boss here is Solvo the Slime, who wiggles and bounces around. You just gotta keep throwing eggs at him until he disintegrates. He also has these little lemon drops that fall off him, which Yoshi can eat to lay eggs from. And every time you beat a second castle in Worlds, the game gives Yoshi and Baby Mario a giant key, granting them access to the next world. World 2 is more of the same, but these include the return of the Koopa Troopas. And again, their sprites just look amazing and super well detailed in comparison to the first Mario world. Castle 2-4 is also where the Boos return, and just like with the Koopas, their sprites look way better. This is also the first castle in the game where it has these cool parts where the game plays in 2.5D. It looks sick as hell. I especially love the graphics on the lava that you gotta ride a log on. It just looks so cool. The boss here is Bigger Boo, and it's a pretty fun one. You still have to throw your eggs at him, but since he's a Boo, he becomes invisible if you look directly at him. So you gotta look away and bounce the eggs back at him off a wall. It's a really fun concept for a boss. Castle 2-8 is a little longer and features these segments where you gotta avoid these thorns on the walls, which you can break away with your eggs, but make sure you don't touch them because they're an instant kill. They're easily one of the most threatening obstacles in this game's castles. One pretty cute thing this level does is that it has these potted plants that you need to push over and break, since they'll contain a key. And when you get to the main boss fight later, who is Roger the Potted Ghost, and all you need to do is just push him over and you'll win. There are some enemies trying to push him in the opposite direction, but overall it's a very simple boss fight, though I always found it kinda neat how the game has you push over potted plants earlier, basically showing you how you're supposed to defeat the boss later. Moving on, the levels in World 3 appear to be more jungle and forest-like, and there's a bunch of funny monkeys running around. There's also some muddy floors in a few levels, which can be super slippery and annoying to deal with. Castle 3-4 has a lot of segments where you're outside, along with having a bunch more monkeys around that are dropping rockets and other stuff on Yoshi. The boss here is easily one of the most bizarre ones in the entire franchise. Instead of Kamek growing the enemy, he decides to shrink Yoshi and Baby Mario. Then a frog eats them, leading to the boss fight happening inside the frog's intestines. You just gotta keep eating big Shy Guys, and then throw your egg at the top of the frog's stomach. The graphics here are really cool, but this is still such an insane idea for a boss fight. It even ends with Yoshi popping out the frog with the most shocked looking expression on his face. Yeah, I don't blame him. It's not every day you get bored. Oh yeah, World 3-6 features a very interesting looking enemy called Hairy Hedgehog, and it's just Sonic. Like, it's a blue hedgehog, it's straight up just Sonic. Like, that shit had to be intentional. Also, I'm pretty sure by the time I post this review, Sonic Superstars is gonna be out, so I guess I should review that game next. But back to Yoshi's Island, Castle 3-8 probably contains my favorite boss fight, Naval Piranha, a giant piranha plant that attacks you in different ways, including him trying to head bop you really fast. You just gotta bounce Yoshi's eggs underneath him to try to hurt him, which can be pretty tricky and challenging. It's a lot of fun. I don't know, I just really like this boss fight, and it also gave me pretty similar vibes to Little Shop of Horrors, if you guys ever saw that. However, this boss is also noteworthy for how you can completely skip it. If you enter the boss room very slowly and hop on the very edge of the platform, just toss an egg at the tiny plant, and it'll cause this cute Easter egg with Kamek to appear. Then next thing you know, the boss dies without you even needing to fight it. It's a pretty funny Easter egg. I just personally don't do it because I really like this boss fight. World 4-1 features the only appearance of the Goombas in the game, along with this bizarre level structure structure that looks like a topless woman? Was that intentional? Level 4-3 includes these countdown timer platforms, which are fascinating but also anxiety-inducing to hop on, and in Castle 4-4, it features the incoming chomps making a return. This level also features a very high quality sprite for the chain chomp, which is used for an enemy known as the shark chomp, which briefly chases after Yoshi. I really love this sprite. The detail on it is so impressive for the Super Nintendo. The boss for this castle is Marching Mild, who breaks away into tinier versions every time you ground pound him. I always found it funny that whenever you get him down to the final small versions, Yoshi can just eat him and that'll beat the boss, which makes the freeze frame when you do so even funnier. And with Castle 4-8, the boss is Hookbill the Koopa, a bigger Koopa Troopa that you gotta knock over on its back and then ground pound on his stomach. You can even hop on his back to get him to spit out more eggs. He's probably my second favorite boss. I love his goofy little face. World 5 appears to be a snow world at first, and it's easily one of the best looking worlds in the game. I love the snowfall effect in the first few levels. I always found it kind of funny that the sound effect that plays when you're slipping on the ice is the exact same one that the mouse enemy used earlier. Seriously, have a listen. There's also one section in World 5-3 where Yoshi enters a hut and comes out with skiing gear, with him skiing down a snow area where he'll need to jump and dodge obstacles that are coming at him really fast. I'll admit, the level of speed being demonstrated here is pretty damn impressive for the Super Nintendo, but that doesn't mean this section is any easier. It took me like a dozen attempts before I finally got through this section. It's not too horribly long, but it's still insanely difficult. When it comes to Castle 5-4, there's some insanely tricky platforming in this castle, with one section dedicated to supporting ghosts helping Yoshi get through these parts where there's a bunch of instant kill thorns everywhere. And the boss here is Sluggy the Unshaven, a jelly-like boss that has a heart in the center of him, and you'll have to keep tossing eggs at him until you hit his heart a few times. It's a little morbid when I describe it out loud, but it's probably one of the best and most impressive boss fights in the game. So while the first few levels had snow in them, the rest of World 5 kinda just ditches the snow theme and just goes back to looking like more standard levels. It almost feels as if while they were making the game, they were just like, alright, World 5 is gonna be the snow world, before changing their minds halfway through making the world because fuck it. Anyways, 5-6 has another auto-scroller section, but this one has Yoshi traveling on top of these clouds. 5-7 features these raven enemies walking around these little spears, and we come across them again in Castle 5-8, which is good foreshadowing because the boss in this castle is going to be a big raven named Raphael. The boss has you running around a circular platform as the camera rotates. You gotta line up with Raphael at the right angle, and then pound these poles into the ground and out the other end to hurt Raph. So the basic gist of this boss fight is that we're just shoving poles up Raphael's ass or something. This game's a bit more violent than I remember. Alright, on to the last world, which is World 6. Like other final worlds, this one features the most lava sections in the game. Castle 6-4 is probably one of my favorite levels, mainly due to its inclusion of 2.5D graphics. The main part of this castle involves Yoshi traversing through this 2.5D maze, where he has to travel through warp pipes and find a key to get past a warp pipe with a cork in it. I don't know, I just really like the visuals here a lot, and the boss fight's not too bad either. It's with Tap Tap the Red Nose, who you can't harm at all because he's just a giant Tap Tap. However, there's these platforms on the ground that you can break away using your eggs and cause Tap Tap to fall into the lava. These appear to be a cute reference to the Breakout arcade game from 1976, which some of you may recall Nintendo made their own blatant copy of in 1978 as Block Fever. Again, it's just a really cute reference. The last 4 levels of the game are easily the most challenging ones, with 6-5 being the worst auto-scroller level in the game, because you're underground and surrounded by lava that can instant kill you. Level 6-6 is a huge maze that you gotta figure out, and level 6-7 has Yoshi running for his life from the shark chomp again. The name of level 6-7 is simply Keep Moving in all caps, which seriously fits. It even features the countdown timer platforms in their most nerve-wracking inclusion yet. When it comes to Castle 6-8, despite being the last level, it's actually not that difficult compared to the other castles. It does open up with a morph bubble section where you gotta fly helicopter Yoshi across a huge bottomless pit, which is definitely the most difficult part of the castle. But then you get to a room where, kinda similar to the first Mario World's last level, you gotta pick one of 4 random doors to follow through. I managed to get a 2.5D section with a bunch of coins in it. After that, you travel through this auto-scroller area where Kamek keeps appearing and tries zapping Yoshi, pretty similar to what his predecessor Magic Koopa did in the first Mario World. And after that, you're at the final boss. So while there definitely are tough sections in this final castle, it can also be insanely short if you manage to land the right door from earlier. But anyways, the final final boss is none other than Baby Bowser, who has 2 phases. The first phase is pretty simple and easy. You just ground pound the floor until you get Bowser to fall over a few times. Almost immediately after that, phase 2 begins with Kamek growing the Baby Bowser into a big man, and... Okay, I know I said that the Naval Piranha from World 3 was my favorite boss fight, but that's mainly because I kinda see regular boss fights and final bosses as 2 different things. This huge battle with the giant Baby Bowser is quite possibly one of the best final bosses in any video game. Bowser's in the background causing rocks to fall from the sky, along with shooting fireballs at Yoshi from time to time, but the falling rocks can actually get rid of the ground you're standing on, which can increase the difficulty a bit. Bowser's also slowly approaching Yoshi into the foreground, so Yoshi has to grab these giant Yoshi eggs and then carefully toss them into the background at Bowser, which will also knock him back a bit. This boss fight, just like a lot of the other ones, is an impressive feat for the Super Nintendo in terms of graphics. And for a final boss, it seriously delivers on everything. The difficulty's perfect, it is a really great challenge and test of your skills, and visually, it's just so nerve-wracking seeing Baby Bowser slowly approach Yoshi while still shrouded in darkness. And managing to land a hit on Baby Bowser while he's a decent distance away is always satisfying to do. Just everything about this boss fight is so perfect, I love it. The music is an especially major highlight. It is easily one of my favorite final boss themes in the entire franchise. While a lot of final boss themes in Mario games were certainly grand and epic sounding, and the Baby Bowser final boss music definitely feels that way, but the song itself is way more rockin'. It's actually a little unbelievable that this track came from the same guy who composed the original Super Mario Bros. Think about that. This is the same composer that made this? And also this. What the hell even is this? Super Nintendo heavy metal? God damn, what a fantastic finale to the game, holy crap. With Baby Bowser defeated, Yoshi manages to find Mario's brother Luigi, and the stork too. Thus, the stork takes off and delivers the brothers to their parents in the Mushroom Kingdom. A bit of a continuity error considering Mario and Luigi are supposed to be from Brooklyn, but whatever. Still a very heartwarming ending to the game. In terms of extra content, the game doesn't have a multiplayer mode, but it does have bonus levels that you can unlock if you get a perfect 100 score in all levels. I never unlocked these levels myself, so here's someone else's footage. I gotta admit, with how simpler it was to complete Super Mario World with the 96 exits, it's actually kinda neat that the sequel actually expanded on this concept more. Maybe someday I'll sit down and get perfect hundreds in this game, but for now, I'm pretty content with the game already. The only other piece of extra content I can think of is how whenever you first beat the game, the title screen actually changes to nighttime, which is pretty neat. Wait, have I not talked about the title screen yet? I know it sounds pretty mundane compared to everything else, but I just love how the title screen rotates around Yoshi's Island. The 3D graphics just look so sick. And the music is especially really cute and has a nice build up to it. And that's basically all of Yoshi's Island that I want to talk about. Well, I didn't grow up playing the game a whole lot, and only really getting to play through it as an adult, I was pretty happy to see that I still came out loving this game as much as I did. The art style is cute, the levels are memorable and challenging, the soundtrack is great, the extra content adds a lot of replay value, and the game overall just has so much charm. Like, I love Yoshi's Island to death. I really don't think I need to say any more. It's easily one of my favorite games in the whole Mario franchise, and out of the whole Yoshi series, it's still my favorite one. So I recommend digging out your Super Nintendo and playing the game if you have a copy lying around, or track it down online somewhere. I'm sure a lot of people watch my reviews and are just like, just emulate the game. But there actually is kind of a decent reason why I recommend playing the game on original hardware. In terms of re-releases, Yoshi's Island has kind of had a weird history. When the ill-fated Virtual Console was initially launched back in 2006, a lot of Nintendo's most renowned titles were slowly added to the service over time, but for whatever reason, the original Super Nintendo version of Yoshi's Island never saw a re-release on the Virtual Console, despite huge fan demand for the game. No, not on Wii or Wii U. Hell, even the new 3DS didn't get it either. The most that the Wii U got was the GBA port, which I will talk about in a bit, but in terms of the original version of the game, it was never released. A lot of fans were disappointed by this, but some some of them theorized that the game probably wasn't re-released on either system due to the graphical effects of the Super FX 2 being a little difficult to emulate, since non-official emulators at the time even had difficulty perfectly emulating the game, so I'm guessing Nintendo just went with the GBA port on Wii U since it emulated better, and figured that was good enough. So while the original Yoshi's Island sadly never saw a re-release during the Virtual Console run, it would finally get re-released in 2017, being included as part of the SNES Classic Mini. The emulation, from what I've heard, wasn't too bad. I'd imagine it would be since it took so damn long to finally see this version of the game get officially ported. Of course, the SNES Classic Mini sold out and went out of stock, and is currently expensive as hell to find anywhere, which is, you know, always fun. Thankfully, with the release of the Nintendo Switch's SNES Online app, the original Yoshi's Island was made available on it in 2019. The emulation is just fine, and I'd recommend playing the game here if any of you own a Switch, and could also afford the $20 a year plan to get the SNES app. Not a bad way to play the game. While on that topic, the game would be remade for Game Boy Advance as part of the Mario Advance series, dubbed Super Mario Advance 3 Yoshi's Island. I've been pretty tough on this game for a few years, mainly being upset that this was the only version of the game available on Wii U, but after actually playing through the full thing for this review, I'll admit, it's a solid version of the game just like all the other Advance ports. Is it the best version of the game? No, I wouldn't go that far, but it's still pretty good. The graphics, for the most part, and music are pretty faithful to the original game, and in one of the more interesting changes, not only did they add in voice clips for Yoshi and the other characters, but they also changed Baby Mario's cry to a far less obnoxious one. Actually, I think this would be the same crying sound effect they'd use in Yoshi's Island DS too. Really, the only downside I have with this port, it's how some of the tinting on coins that were red coins in the SNES version were for some reason removed. I know a lot of people won't really give a shit, but I always thought that detail was pretty neat in the original game. The other downside is the screen crunch, but honestly, it doesn't really get in the way that much, especially if you played this game on Wii U with an HD TV like I did. And I will admit, one really cool thing about this port is that the original title screen for the game is now running at a smooth 60 frames a second. It's really sweet, I like it. All in all, Super Mario Advance 3 isn't too bad. I just personally prefer going back to the original Super Nintendo version whenever I play this game. And in comparison to the other Mario Advance ports, I'd probably say this is my least favorite one in the Advance games, but overall, it's not a bad way to play the game. And while the original game didn't come to the Virtual Console in any way, Mario Advance 3 would be released as part of the Wii U Virtual Console in 2014. Well, the Wii U eShop is gone, so you can't really get it officially anymore. But in May 2023, Mario Advance 3 would become available on the Switch's GBA app, which you can get for $50 a year. So if you just want to spend $20 for Nintendo's online service, then you could play the SNES version, or if you're willing to pay the full $50 a year, you can play the GBA version. While the pricing can be a bit of a bitch, it's still pretty cool that Nintendo fans have access to both versions of this game on the same console finally. Though, weirdly enough, the 2014 Wii U port was not actually the first time Mario Advance 3 was re-released. Believe it or not, it was first made available on the 3DS in 2011, but it was only exclusive to Nintendo's 3DS Ambassador program back when the handheld was first released. Mario Advance 3 was one of just 5 games released on the program, and this was the only way you could even play these games on the 3DS. So yeah, despite the fact that the Ambassador program clearly showed that the 3DS was fully capable of playing GBA games, we'd never see proper releases for GBA games on the actual 3DS eShop in any shape or form. That has got to be one of the most confusingly stupid decisions Nintendo has ever made, along with not making DS games purchasable on the 3DS eShop, despite the system being fully backwards compatible with the DS, along with also selling DS games just fine on the Wii U. Why? What the hell was the point?
What were they thinking?
Okay, whatever. That was Yoshi's Island, along with all the versions of the game that you can look up and play. I love this game to death, I adore it so much, go play it. The game was also a really big success, selling over 4 million copies on the Super Nintendo alone. This would ultimately lead to the spin-off Yoshi games that we all know and love, like Yoshi's Story, Yoshi's Island DS, Woolly World, and Crafted World, along with more gimmicky titles like Topsy Turvy and Touch and Go. Yeah, there appears to be 2 different types of Yoshi games when it comes to his spin-offs. There are games where it's just Yoshi solo, and there are games where Yoshi is carrying around baby Mario again. So you've got the choice of either playing as Yoshi on his own, or do you really want that stupid fucking baby stapled to his back again? I'll have to take a look at all the other Yoshi games and their own reviews in the future, but for now, go check out the original Yoshi's Island on either Super Nintendo or Super Mario Advance 3. It's easily one of my favorite video games ever. It's really cute and still fun to play after nearly 30 years. That's all I've got for now. I'll see you all in the next review, and thanks for watching.